Okay, welcome everybody. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that people have relatively things that are explained that aren't in linguistics. Because if I start with the linguistics examples, you're going to have this confound that you already know probably some of the things about the topic. If I start with some non-linguistic examples, where you're going to not know the topic as well, and so you can focus more on the message and your experience of, do I understand this? Do I feel like I need to understand this? Okay, so I'm going to illustrate this with a recent question that I had that I wanted to know, which is a little bit linguistic. This is my Estonian local content. And this, when I went down to the breakfast at the hotel yesterday, and this guy said something to me. It was around 3 or 4 syllables. I don't know what it was. Some of you who were at dinner last night may know where this is going. And so I did a search for Estonian greetings to see if I could get any of them and learn some things. And so this is a nice person who posts some stuff about Estonian on the internet. In the meantime, I'm going to summarize it. So this video starts out, are you unsure of when to use ciao in Estonian? This is not my problem. I want to emphasize to you that that is not the problem that I am having. But she's called the video. I want to say this person is very nice. She is not a big time social media influencer because she is posting lessons on Estonian on TikTok. I don't want any of this to be interpreted as like Gretchen hates this person. She's very helpful. No one else is posting this. I really appreciate her video. She's just like a normal person posting stuff. But nonetheless, sometimes we have to criticize from a place of love in order to understand better the things that we are doing wrong. So this is getting into this sort of question of starting in the middle. My difficulty is not when to be unsure about using ciao in Estonian. In fact, ciao is the one I am most confident about, because this one got borrowed into English also from Italian, and I'm aware. I'm like, oh, great. The information this actually gives me is, oh, they use ciao in Estonian. That's great. I already have some hypotheses about how to use it. Okay. So anyway, then she starts with, so I'm not going to remember the Estonian in these greetings, but then she starts with, okay, things like hey that you can say to your friends. And again, this is not my problem, because the thing is, anybody who sort of knows me, I don't have like close friends and family in Estonia. That's why I'm watching this video, because in fact, if I knew that, I could ask them, or I would already know some Estonian. I have some like very nice, friendly acquaintances here, but I don't need to learn things that are super informal, because who am I going to use them with? So she starts out with hey, and I'm like, great. So I learned when I was in Helsinki last week that everyone uses hey, even the people who work in the hotel use hey with me, and it felt very informal. Here, maybe it's more informal. Okay, great, I cannot use it. That's fine. And then she goes through a couple other greetings. I don't remember them. And she ends up with tere, and she's like, this one you can use lots of different contexts. And I'm like, great, this is the one I want. Tere, you can use it with friends. You can use it if you walk into a shop. Oh, walking into a shop, that is a thing that I can do here. That is a thing I'm capable of doing. I may not have close friends and family in Estonia, but I do have the ability to walk into a shop, and I would like to know this greeting. And also you can use it also to say goodbye as well. Tere, both directions? No, am I wrong? Okay, well, so I'm wrong. This is the kinds of things that people misremember when they're experiencing your lingham. Like, can I do this? So tere, great. And then there's like some more long ones that mean things like good morning. And so I decided not to remember those. But then, so I watched this video before I came to Estonia because I thought I should know at least one word before I entered the country. And I remembered tere. That's the only word I remembered. And then when I heard this person in the hotel say a longer phrase to me, I was like, ooh, I bet it's one of those long ones that I ignored at the end of the video. And so I go back to the video, and I'm pretty sure that what this guy in the hotel was saying to me was tere hommikust. But notice how this video is in the wrong order from what I need as someone who is newly arriving to Estonia and doesn't need the informal stuff. I need the formal stuff that someone who's employed in a hotel is going to use very politely with a guest, or someone who's employed in a shop is going to use very politely with a guest. Because even though I'm meeting people and having, nice dinners with them, at this point they know that I speak English. And so the ones that I need for the sort of social thing are the more formal sections. And also, I don't have this question, am I unsure when to use ciao in Estonian? this is not the question that I have. This is, would you like to know how to greet people politely in Estonian? That's the question that I actually have when I'm arriving here. So this is a really good example of someone trying very hard and not doing a completely bad job, because I did learn the things that I wanted to learn out of this video. I just learned them in the other order from what my priorities were compared to how she's thinking I'm going to get in the head of someone who's trying to learn Estonian. And it's possible that she's aiming this as people who are like living in Estonia and don't speak Estonian very well yet. And so maybe they have a different set of priorities. Maybe this is a real question that she's been asked by somebody. But also, it's very hard to get in the head of someone even when you're trying to. And yet, even when you don't completely get in the head of someone else, you can still make things that are actually useful and interesting to them. Even when you give like so much information that I can't remember all of it, I have learned 2 or 3 interesting things from this video, and that's pretty good, actually. So your audience is both, sometimes they're different from what you think they are, but also they're willing to be forgiving at some levels when they can learn things from you. All right. Let's head outside linguistics. Some of you saw this thread yesterday because it's one of my favorites. I'm going to give you a few minutes with it. And I want you to think about the emotional reaction that you have to this information. How does it make you feel? Are there parts where you're like sort of slowing down and your eyes are glazing over and you're like, oh my God, this is too long? Are there parts where you're like, oh yeah, this bit, I like it? So it can be working for some people and not working for other people, which is also interesting, that there's not one answer that's correct, but there's some things that can work well for you, work well for some other group. Okay, I'm going to skip to the next one, and then we're going to come back to this and sort of see these in comparison with each other. So let's go forward through the next example, and then we can come back to these because some things are more clear when you're comparing 2 examples. So this is the Wikipedia article about speed of light, which is a pretty similar topic. We can see we have the same information here. Sunlight takes about 8 minutes to travel from the sun to the earth, which was also in the other thread. How does this Wikipedia article make you feel? Yeah, so this one has footnotes, hyperlinks, and you could, in some ways, it's doing a thing where if you want to know any more information about any one of these words, you can click on them, you can see what they say, you could spend hours reading about this, but also you could spend hours reading about this. So the first one is relying more on the sort of personality and the trust that the writer has built with their audience to say, yeah, I know stuff about this, and I'm going to tell you. This one is saying, no, you can verify that we've said specific things in here. Yeah. Yesterday, when I put these examples up, some people noticed that this one's written in the second person mostly. You can do this, you can see this, you can hold your hand in front of your face. And this one is more third person. This thing happens, and without respect to where the audience is or what the audience is doing. Okay, let's move on to the third one, which is even more fun and exciting. So this is an academic paper from the author of the Twitter thread in the first case, because she's also practicing academic astrophysicist, and she doesn't always write like this on Twitter. So we investigate the effect of non-evaporating primordial black holes, PBHs, whatever those are, in the ionization and thermal history of the universe. Now this one's looking really good. This one's looking so easy. We're like, I don't know what this is about. I went to her Google Scholar profile and I was like, well, this one, but this is like her second most cited paper on her Google Scholar profile. So clearly there's like several hundred astrophysicists who think this is an interesting paper, which is great. I'm really happy for them. We're not astrophysicists. We don't read the Astrophysical Journal. That's not something I think anybody in this room reads. And so even something like Wikipedia that can be sort of at this middle level of somewhat accessible, especially if you're looking for information about the topic, but also somewhat inaccessible because it very densely presents information about the topic. this is sort of getting people intrigued about the topic in the first place, and versus sort of giving them information in general. And this is something that's just for experts, which is fine. Sometimes you want to write for experts. Okay, good. So we have these two sentences, and we could add this additional sentence about just assuming the speed of light and not even telling people what it is, because that's what you do in an academic paper. Oh yeah, everybody knows what the speed of light is. Figure out how to do this video. This is from a series that a YouTube channel by Wired did, called Wired did, where they had various experts on, and they had them communicate the same concept to 5 different levels. So we're going to watch this video twice. So the first time you can actually just sort of focus on what they're saying, and then we're going to take a little pause and watch each section one by one, so you can see, okay, how does he talk about the same concept to different levels of people, and what sorts of explanations what do those things involve? Yeah.
What the connectome is it's a kind of a newly made up term for describing a kind of neuroscience research where we try to map the brain at a scale that's never been mapped before. Every person here can leave with understanding it at some level. Do you know why we're here today?
Because we're talking about science.
Yes, we're going to talk about science, and we're going to talk about a very specific kind of science about people who study brains. Do you know what a brain is? What is it?
And something that helps you remember things.
Definitely. So what we're going to talk about is something that people study in the brain called the connectome.
Oh.
Do you know that your body is made up of really tiny things called cells?
Yes, I know that.
Okay, well, there's more cells in your brain, like way more cells than all the stars we can see. And so what the connectome is we'd like to know where every cell in your brain is and how it talks to every other cell in your brain.
Oh.
That was awesome, Daniel. Thank you.
Connectome?
Connectome.
To be honest, I have no idea.
That's good. That's a great place to start. There are cells in your brain. Those brain cells are connected by wires to each other. Electricity travels down those wires and communicates from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain. And each of those brain cells makes, 1,000 connections, something like 100 trillion connections in one brain, in your brain. Could I take all of that information and put it inside a computer? Would that computer then be you?
Computers, they don't have feelings. They won't have feelings. And I think that's one thing that makes the human race strong.
I would say that map also has your feelings in it. Because here's why. Your feelings, most neuroscientists think, come from your brain anyway. And amazingly, when you feel happy or sad or angry or scared, that's just brain cells communicating with each other. So I think today we're going to talk about a connectome. Have you ever heard of that?
A connectome?
Yeah.
No,
Awesome.
I don't
Good.
think so.
It's a map of all the connections between every neuron in your brain. Literally, in a human brain, something like the map of the 1 quadrillion connections that 100 billion neurons make with each other.
Is this like a map that's like an actual visual representation, like using microscopy, or
Yes.
just data? Wow.
Yeah.
I'm understanding more so that it's a mapping of the circuitry, the pathways between neurons that can lead to evidence of patterns in your brain that are common between different people.
We have to use electron microscopes. And then what we have been developing are ways to slice the brain into really thin slices, use an electron microscope to take a picture of each slice, and then use computers to put it all back. Imagine that we could get the map of every connection, right? And we knew how neurons fired. Do you think we could put that in a computer, that map, and then therefore that computer should be able to think just like the brain that we extracted it from?
Well, the computer only communicates with itself in binary, so it only has two options. It can only ask itself yes or no questions, but a human brain has an infinity of directions that it can go.
Neurons are also digital, meaning a neuron either fires or it doesn't fire. So that's either 1 or a 0. And it's the combination of those ones or zeros that actually produce the 10,000 different answers that you say.
It's a large-scale attempt to understand the wiring map of the brain, essentially.
Yeah. Great.
I think that it's definitely needed. Understanding the anatomy of the brain is definitely important, but it doesn't necessarily tell us everything about the function. So there's some sort of temporal order from neuron to neuron and region to region that we may not be able to pick up.
This is where it gets really crazy. Could we simulate that map inside a computer? And would that computer then be thinking like that original brain for which we made the map?
I mean, that's not the person. I mean, having a representation of someone's neural network is just that. It's just a representation of their neural network. I mean,
because there's more to you in here than just information passing between neurons.
I'd like to think so.
It would be like if you simulated a hurricane. Imagine we could keep track of every variable of a hurricane. Wind speed, every water molecule, et cetera, temperature. And we put that inside a super fast computer and we simulated it, right? I don't think anyone would think that the inside of the computer would get wet, even though we had simulated the hurricane perfectly. That wetness is consciousness, is what we are. Is it ethical to imagine mapping a male brain versus a female brain to look for differences between those, to explain alleged behavioral differences between them?
Every single person is different, and so it should be okay to map every single person's brain. I mean, I understand that that it's very sensitive, you know.
Wait, what do you think is sensitive?
Mapping an Indian brain versus a Caucasian brain, or politically, I think that people may have some issue with mapping out what causes or what makes a difference between different types of people.
Maybe a wiring diagram is not sufficient to understand a brain, and it would be crazy to think that that would be sufficient, actually.
If you limit the connectome to be just the wiring diagram without, more information about myelination or glial cells or all types of environmental features that surround, the neurons and axons, then you have an incomplete picture.
Right.
No doubt.
Sometimes when people they worry about connectomics, I think what they're actually worrying about is that it's the end of the way that we used to do neuroscience.
What do you think about memory? Do you think that there's ways of resolving what the substrate of human memory is? Is it just LTP and LTD?
I'm not sure if you had a connectome of a human brain, of an adult human, I would be able to read out memories from that.
You don't think it's just the synaptic weights, like an artificial neural network gets trained to do particular
It could
things?
absolutely be, but without knowing what the weights were before the memory was made.
What if you had a violinist learn a piece of Bach music, and could you find those notes somewhere in their brain that they didn't know before?
Yes.
I'm a musician, and I don't think it's possible. I think that there are too many, so much of it is associative to what you already know.
And as a musician, how much of it do you think is in your hands versus in your brains? Meaning, like, you do have connections in your muscles from the nerves that are from your spinal cord. What if some of the learning is there?
Are you still doing EM, or?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of X-ray in addition to EM, and this is actually, I'm not saying it's the only problem, but it's the only problem that needs to be solved right away, is that the data analysis, right? In fact, I think we calculated that there aren't enough.
Okay, so I think this bit at the end gets a little bit more technical, but let's, I'm getting bored, so Well, let's go back and look at the earlier version with the child and see. So I'm gonna sort of, let you think about this. Let's go back and look at the child and see, okay, what is this person doing with the child?
Map the brain at a scale that's never been mapped before.
Or you think would work for
Every
a child.
person here can leave with understanding it at some level.
Okay.
Do you know why we're here today?
Because we're talking about science.
Yes, we're going to talk about.
Okay. What's this guy doing that's good with the child? Like asking the child, do you know why we're here today? He doesn't do this with the adults because he assumes the adults have probably had this explained to them or whatever. But he's starting with this very basic question for the child. And this is one of the advantages you have when you're doing something that's one-on-one. But at the beginning of this workshop, I also asked you, like, what are your goals from this? What do you think this will help you with? What will this do? So it is something you could also do at a larger scale, asking the child questions. Anything else so far? Yeah, there's a comment here. I liked how we asked the child questions to establish some sort of common ground. Exactly. And also, what's he doing with his body? He's getting really close and he's sort of bending down a bit. So he's like at the child's level. So this is something else, like physically. I also want people to notice, like, think about gestures.
Science, and we're going to talk about a very specific kind of science about people who study brains. Do you know what a brain is?
So here we have the question again.
What is it?
Something that helps you remember things.
Definitely. So
what else is going on here? Yeah? So we asked, do you know what a brain is? The child says yes. And so he stops there, right? No. He asks, okay, what is it? Because, a child could have a lot of different understandings. I mean, an adult could have a lot of different understandings of what the brain is. And it helps you remember things. That's pretty good, actually. Like, that's not bad. We could have said, like, it's in your head, like, what is it about this? But so he's starting from what the existing level of understanding is. He's not launching directly into the explanation. He's doing this assessment first of what does this other person already know. And he's asking these questions in this particular order. Do you know why we're here? Do you know what the brain is? Okay, we need the audio again.
What we're going to talk about, this is something that people study in the brain called the connectome. Do you know that your body is made up of really tiny things called cells?
Okay, so more questions. Sometimes people will tell you when they're giving well-meaning advice about how to do science communication to only ask WH questions and not yes-no questions. And this is the type of sort of folk linguistic advice that's like, oh, you need to ask open-ended questions. In practicality, when we look at studies about how questions work, most of the time people don't respond to yes-no questions with only a yes or no. And in the case where they do, like this child who's like, do you know what the brain is? Yes. Okay, what is it? You can ask elaborative questions. Asking yes-no questions is actually not necessarily a bad thing, because pragmatically speaking, people often do elaborate on their answers, or you can use that as a probe to elaborate on them. I think it's very simplistic advice to say you never ask yes-no questions because it ignores this thing about pragmatics. Now, my assessment here is that this explainer guy, the neuroscientist, is also a little bit performing for the camera, because he's not really trying to deliver an explanation of what cells are to the child. And you could do this a lot slower, but he knows he has like 5 minutes. So I think he's sort of embedding this. And like, if I would have wanted to do this with a child, I would have like some diagrams, like really slow things down. But like, okay, let's say for the sake of argument that maybe the child does know what cells are. Could just say yes. Okay, why? But like, and having a yes/no question sort of gives people exactly like, okay, I feel like I could successfully answer a yes/no question. And he's saying like, yes, that's right, a lot to this kid, even when he's adding to the explanation, but he's not saying like, no, your understanding of the brain is wrong, and I'm going to tell you why it's wrong. It's like, okay, yes, this is a good start. Let's build on that. And he also introduces the word connectome quite early because that's like the point of the video. But like, if you're going to do this for a kid, maybe that's actually not the most important word. But like, sure, okay, it's the point of the video. Let's play with this. Yeah. Really tiny things called, oh, also really tiny things called cells. That is not a technical explanation that's going to stand up in like a class. But okay, your body is made up of really tiny things called cells. No, fine.
Yes, I know that.
Okay, well, there's more cells in your brain, like way more cells than all the stars we can see.
I love this bit. What's good about this bit? Yeah, the brain's going, ah. So this kid has already learned something cool. I don't know if the connectome part is as cool as this bit that the kid has learned, right? What else has he done that makes this effective? Right. So like, does a 5-year-old know what a million, billion, trillion is? Yeah. But maybe the 5-year-old has looked in the sky and seen there's a lot of stars there. I can't count them. That's a lot. I've looked this up for other reasons. There's about 6,000 visible stars in the sky, which is a lot of stars. Don't get me wrong, but it's not actually billions and trillions. It's like 6,000. So if you're someone who's like coming to this as an astrophysicist and being like, that's inaccurate, because actually it should be like 10 times the amount of stars in the sky and not, or like 1,000 times the number of stars in the sky. Have you missed the point? And so like this number is fine for this child. And you guys can remember the numbers that he uses for the other people, which are like these trillions and quadrillions and stuff like this. For the 5-year-old, this number conveys a lot in a very visible way to a 5-year-old. Any more thoughts about this section?
Like saying a lot is a lot, and a child can just imagine, oh, how much is this? But if you give a numerical term,
yeah, and he still says way more cells than all the stars we can see. Way more, could be like 1,000 times as much. You know, he's conveying like it's a lot. Oh yeah, sorry, we should have passed the mic around. Yeah, say it again.
What did I say? For a child, a lot is like they can just imagine it's like there's no end to it. But if you just give them a number, they might not know.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I don't know these numbers. I don't know millions or billions or something like that.
And for a child, also a lot is like maybe they have a lot of toys at home, and that's like 100, right? So what is a lot depending on the scale? The number of stars in the sky certainly feels like this sort of infinite number, even if it is actually like 6,000. Okay, let's do the next bit. Ready?
And so what the connectome is we'd like to know where every cell in your brain is and how it talks to every other cell in your brain.
Do you guys feel like you understand it? I didn't know what the connectome was before I watched this video. I am not a neuroscientist. How do you guys feel about this explanation?
Very simplified.
Yeah, it's very simplified. I still don't feel like I had a full understanding of what the connectome is only from the 5-year-old version. I'm like, so we're mapping the cells in the brain, but we've done that in lots of other ways before. Like, what's the big deal about this one? Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, so just repeating the question, it's hard to imagine the child can really imagine that cells can talk. So yeah, is this really getting through to the child? I think the number of cells in your brain, that got through to this kid. I think the talking part, I don't know how well it's getting through. Yeah. Okay, let's try the 13-year-old.
Connect tone?
Connect tone.
To be honest, I have no idea.
That's good. That's a great place to start. There are cells in your brain.
Okay, so what's here that's different from the 5-year-old? The tone already is different. Yeah, he doesn't start by asking, do you know why we're here today to talk about science? Do you know what the brain is? So he's making some assumptions already about what the 13-year-old knows that are different from the 5-year-old, because I think if you asked a 13-year-old, do you know what the brain is, then I'd be a bit insulted. Be like, come on, like I've heard of this before. So anything else? I'm just gonna get more water while we're. So he also says connect home. So obviously this video has been edited to cut out the question, do you know what the connectome is? And this person doesn't know what that is, which is great. How does he respond to that question? How does the neuroscientist respond? Yeah.
Good place to start.
All right, so it's a very positive response to not knowing something. I'm not trying to shame people for not knowing anything.
Those brain cells are connected by wires to each other.
I told you guys earlier to look at the gestures. Can you look at those gestures again?
In your brain, those brain cells are connected by wires to each other. Electricity travels down those wires and communicates from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain.
Yeah. So he doesn't have any diagrams. The point of this is there's no diagrams, there's no fancy animation, there's no tricks. What he's got is the human body, hands. So you can see this bit, the fist is standing for the neuron. The other finger is standing for the connection. So you have a visual aspect to it. He didn't try to do this gesture with the 5-year-old. Maybe it would have worked. Maybe it wouldn't have. Yeah. Any more thoughts about what's going on with this part? So the gesture's got quite a bit of repetition. It's not just like, okay, I've done the gesture once, but it's kind of going over it a few times, which is sort of natural to do in conversation anyway. But it's reinforced.
Building on.
Like, I think one of the other things in this video is he's sort of quitting while he's ahead. So the 5-year-old, it's like, all right, well, we've got 2 minutes. What we've learned is the brain has lots of cells in it, more than the stars in the sky, and they have connections in some level, right? They talk to each other. We just stopped at a certain point and didn't wait for the other person to get frustrated before stopping, because then the memory that they're left with is, well, I did this thing and it was frustrating at the end, rather than I did this thing and I feel good about it. And if they run into each other again next year or in 5 years when this kid is 13, then they could have this longer explanation, but you don't have to like push someone to their limits of frustration and then be like, oh, okay, well, now I'll stop.
Wondering, does attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a factor, but also that there is more of sort of an individual effect and sort of a task-based effect. So if we're like, oh, this is a child, so they can only understand 30 seconds. Sometimes adults get bored by 30 seconds if it's not looking engaging. Sometimes children, if they get really into doing something, like if a child wants to like pour water from one pot to the other pot and do it for 2 hours, sometimes that's what a child wants to do. Or their attention span of like, being on a playground or something is like, I'm here for the whole day and I don't want to leave. Like, I think it's you can sometimes use attention span as like a cop-out for like, oh, well, they can't understand it because of the attention span. Are they doing something they find engaging? People who are doing something they find engaging can do that for quite a while. even if it's pouring water from one pot to another or something that I would not find very engaging personally, you know. Like, yeah.
And each of those brain cells makes, 1,000 connections, something like 100 trillion connections.
So 13-year-olds, numbers.
The numbers seem to get more specific and also larger every time.
Yeah. Yeah. So the numbers so we're going for like 1,000 connections, 100 trillion connections. And if anybody remembers from the one that's coming up, it's going to be like a quadrillion. So he's doing big numbers, but he's not quite doing the biggest numbers.
In one brain, in your brain. Could I take all of that information and put it inside a computer? Would that computer then be you?
Computers, they don't have feelings.
Okay, thoughts about this? Who your brain replicating? So yeah, it's very personal. Oh, we should pass the mic around. Sorry. Okay, just shout very loudly. Oh, they do. Okay. Okay. I'll try to repeat the questions also as they're being asked. So would this computer then be you, making this question very personal?
And he's also like asking for the child's opinion.
Yeah.
What the child thinks, or like
Yeah, he's asking for the opinion. And one of the things I like about this explanation is that this scientist is doing less of the talking than you might expect from the title. So neuroscientist explains one concept in 5 levels of difficulty. I'm expecting here that I'm going to hear from the neuroscientist. And yet this guy is actually doing almost as much listening as he's doing talking, depending on the video. Like he's asking a question, he's listening to the answer, he's responding to the answer, and he's sounding like he doesn't try to do this with the 5-year-old, but the 13-year-old can have this sort of ethical opinion or philosophical opinion about is this you? Do computers have feelings? This sort of stuff, which is a more sophisticated thing to do. Yeah.
It's like a level that's that kind of changes already during the dialogue. So he begins with just saying wire and then not mixing with neurons of the brain cell. Then later on, he actually says, "Oh, it's a connection. It's a neuron."
Yeah.
So already during dialogue, he kind of builds up on this foundation. He already introduces terminology that the kid might learn in school, and then when he actually does, it's not going to be as big of a shock.
And sometimes that's a really good point, because he starts out with like brain cell, which is easier than neuron, because neuron is more specialized. Something that we have a tendency to do when we start trying to do explanations is do the other order. To say, okay, people are going to need to know what a neuron is. So I'm going to introduce the word neuron at the beginning of my explanation, and I'm going to say neuron, which is a brain cell, and then I'm going to keep using neuron, and maybe they've forgotten that neuron meant brain cell from the beginning. If we build up in the other order of starting with something like brain cell, which is understandable, and it's not incorrect. It's less precise, but it's not incorrect. And then sometimes you can gradually sneak in terms that refer to that without starting out at the beginning with like, okay, here's 10 words you need to know in order to understand my explanation, delivering the explanation in simpler terms and gradually introducing a few of the more complex terms as we go. So that's a really good observation. Mm-hmm.
Know that some of the linguistic terminology is a bit tricky when it comes to physics.
Mm-hmm.
How would we then like try to avoid, overdefining what it is or what's
So the question is, we know that some linguistics terminology is tricky when it comes to definition. How can we avoid doing that? We're going to get into that a little bit more in the linguistics section of this. But one thing that I do with the podcast a lot, is using a key example of the phenomenon rather than using the sort of Latinate scientific term for it. So instead of saying something like, if we're talking about a whole bunch of cases, instead of saying something like the allative or the illative, you can say like the from case and the to case. And then if you're somebody who speaks a language with prepositions, you're like, oh, to and from, these are words that I know. So originally, that's what the Latin vocabulary is doing. But to sort of get back to a word that already means something to people in a generic sense and use it as your keyword, and then if later they're exposed to the terminology, it's not as hard because they have words that have roots that they're already familiar with. Sometimes that can be effective. The computer is slightly asleep. So that's one option. Another option is, picking like one piece of terminology that you think is really important for them to learn and then figuring out ways to talk around the rest of it. We did an episode about ergativity where we used the word ergative. We didn't use the words absolutive, nominative, or accusative because we're like, the problem with ergativity is people get 4 new words all at once. And so they need one word to be a handle for this phenomenon, but we're going to come up with all sorts of other circumlocutions to talk about these other 3 parts of the concepts because otherwise it's too many things to remember all at once. So sometimes using terminology, sometimes not using terminology is one part here.
They won't have feelings, and I think that's one thing that makes the human race strong.
I would say that map also has your feelings in it, because here's why. Your feelings, most neuroscientists think, come from your brain anyway. And amazingly, whether when you feel happy or sad or angry or scared, that's just brain cells communicating with each other.
Okay. What do we think about this bit?
More than the lecture.
Yeah.
Like he's introducing what neuroscientists think, how they do this.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me that the 13-year-old has sort of the same objection that everyone else keeps having, right? So you look at this and he's like, well, neuroscientists think this. And then you're talking to like the neuroscience grad student, and the neuroscience grad student is like, yeah, but like, is this really your whole self? But saying it in more sophisticated terms. So, I think it's, in some ways, I think he's sort of pushing back too much because there is this additional neuroscience point of view that's happening.
It felt to me like this was very rushed.
Yeah.
Like he's jumping way ahead and giving too much of his own, like he's asking questions rather than giving information, and he's sort of making a lot of assumptions.
Yeah, so like this is a stunt video. It's 9 minutes long. There are other versions of this video that are like 25 minutes long, and maybe they're better at being less rushed, but then also like, how long do we have for a workshop? So I chose one of the shorter ones because we're going to, go through it at this sort of granular level.
So I think today we're going to talk about a connectome. Have you ever heard of that?
A connectome?
Yeah.
No,
Awesome.
I don't
Good.
think so.
It's a map of all the connections between every neuron in your brain. Literally, in a human brain, something like the map of the 1 quadrillion connections that 100.
There's our quadrillion. All right, what's different about this explanation?
Like also with the teenager, he starts out with the main term already. Like we're going to talk about the connectome. Like, do you know what that is? Kind of probe her if she has any backgrounds.
And depending on the college student, if you're a college student in neuroscience, maybe you do already know what it is. So yeah, we have probing for what she knows. We're already starting out using a word like neuron. There's no brain cell here. We can go right into neuron. Anything else about this explanation?
Billion neurons make with each other.
Is this like a map that's like an actual visual representation, like using microscopy, or just data? Wow, wow.
Yeah. Just take the mic. Less gesturing in this one. So instead of having this very like visual representation, he's still in his posture, he's still sort of bent towards her, but he's not like doubled down, so he's the same height as the child.
And he lets her speak more than he himself actually does. So it's more like she's brainstorming, she's coming up with the information that she knows.
Yeah.
And this person just supports what it is that she's coming up with.
Yeah. So here she's asking, like, is this a representation or is this data? Like the sort of questions about like, where does this connectome exist? So he's doing a lot more listening and being like, yep, okay, no, oh, it's this thing. Does it have anything to do with what I'm doing with you in the class right now, where I'm making you come up with analyses of these videos?
I'm understanding more so that it's a mapping of the circuitry, the pathways between neurons that can lead to evidence of patterns in your brain that are common between different people.
We have to use electron microscopes. And then what we have been developing are ways to slice the brain into really thin slices, use an electron microscope to take a picture of each slice, and then use computers to put it all back. Imagine that we could get the map of every connection, right? And we knew how neurons fired. Do you think we could put that in a computer, that map, and then therefore that computer should be able to think just like the brain that we extracted it from?
Well, the computer only communicates with itself in binary, so it only has two options. It can only ask itself yes or no questions, but...
Okay, so what's going on with this?
Ethical questioning. Right. That's the greatest thing ever. So they ask with more.
So the researcher repeats the same ethical question, and now he gets a more elaborated answer.
Yeah, he's asking the same ethical question. He gets a more elaborated answer this time. And earlier, she sort of delivers this explanation of how she thinks it works, and then he elaborates saying, yeah, we use electron microscopes and we do the slicing, but she's what she thinks is the understanding first. And then he's saying, yes, and we use this tool and we use this tool, rather than like, here is me, I have some tools and I'm finding this stuff out for you, without giving you that space to talk back.
And he's actually taking the question, or like taking it apart into smaller pieces, because I think like from the 13-year-old, he asked just like, would the computer be you? Which is for me a different question than would that computer think like you? So he's like kind of splicing it up into smaller sections now.
Yeah, so he's asking different sort of philosophical questions. And in many ways, the 13-year-old gets this harder philosophical question because it's more fundamental than, would this computer be able to think, which is, as you say, like a slightly less hard question.
Seems to remain quite me here. So he actually doesn't give an answer. They are kind of like discussing, but they don't like round it up.
Yeah. So, and this is something that sometimes people run into when you're doing LinkComm as well. Like, do I have to have all of the answers? What if this is really cutting edge stuff that we don't know the answers to? Sometimes opening up the question and listening to people's responses is itself part of the communication. I'm going to skip, I think, this bit about binary just for time.
Large-scale attempt to understand the wiring map of the brain, essentially.
Yeah. Great.
So obviously we've had the question cut again, but what is this an answer to? You know, the connection is,
here's a neuroscientist grad student who says,
yeah, this is what it is.
Think that it's definitely needed. Understanding the anatomy of the brain is definitely important, but it doesn't necessarily tell us everything about the function. So there's some sort of temporal order from neuron to neuron and region to region.
There's some sort of temporal order. So the brain happens in time. So this is already beginning to be like, oh, I'm not a neuroscience grad student. I don't know all of this stuff. What can we notice about this explanation?
Well, first, it's not the guy's explanation.
Yeah.
I have quite a big bone to pick about the whole thing here.
Yeah.
Because first, it's like rather the woman speaking, and the other is like, it's not really, so it doesn't answer the title. It's not neuroscientist explains, right? And it's also not really giving you a good idea of how it looks like to explain from neuroscientist to neuroscientist. Like I think they did a better job with the top guy.
Yeah.
And so they are just talking about the same philosophical question. And that's a discussion, right? So I don't know what to pick up from this, actually.
Yeah. Well, and this is partly like I agree with you, the advertising is misleading here because she's doing all of the explaining. This guy is just being like, yep. Like, and sometimes that's, but also she doesn't need that explanation because she already knows. And so really he's explaining it at like 3 levels of difficulty, and then we have 2 experts who are just sitting there and they're having a nice little chat, which is a slightly different task. So we're not going to watch the entirety of the other ones. But she's also using vocabulary that's much more sophisticated at this point because she has this understanding of the concept.
But he's still leaning.
Yeah.
He's only not leaning with the guy.
Yeah, so this one he's still maybe a little bit patronizing with like, oh, I'm leaning in, I'm engaging. Here's me engaging, doing this.
That we may not be able to pick up.
This is where it gets really crazy. Could we simulate that map inside a computer? And would that computer then be thinking like that original brain for which we made the map?
I mean, that's not the person. I mean, having a representation of someone's neural network is just that. It's just a representation of their neural network. I mean,
because there's more to you in here than just information passing between neurons.
I'd like to think so.
It would be like if you simulated a hurricane. Imagine we could keep track of every variable of a hurricane, wind speed, every water molecule, et cetera, temperature, and we put that inside a super fast computer and we simulated it, right? I don't think anyone would think that the inside of the computer would get wet.
So, yeah, what happens here?
His reaction is quite different. He keeps saying, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
If someone reacts to me that way, then I kind of doubt myself. Like,
yeah.
He wants to challenge
in many ways, like, she's making the same objection that the 13-year-old makes, but she's able to say it more sophisticatedly. And so he takes her objection more seriously than he takes the objection of the 13-year-old, which is, kind of interesting. But they're saying effectively the same thing. And in this case, he's giving like this whole analogy that supports her objection, which he doesn't do with a 13-year-old. I'm not having you watch this video because I think this guy is only doing the right thing, right? Like, I think it's complicated doing anything like this. Okay,
So we have 2 levels of recipients here, right? One is the person he's talking to, and the other people is like us.
Right, exactly. So
you need to have something juicy to pick on for us. I mean, we don't want to see him explaining the same thing to 5 different people. We want to see some discussion or something.
Right, like we want to see it different, and he's aware, and the producers are aware that this is also playing to a camera, and this is performatively doing it at 5 different levels. So he's got to say something different. Yeah. Let's fast forward to the entrepreneur guy, still leaning forward a bit.
to understand the brain. And it would be crazy to think that that would be sufficient, actually.
If you limit the connectome to be just the wiring diagram without, more information about myelination or glial cells or
Correct.
all types of environmental features that surround myelination or glial cells or
Correct.
I just want to leave those on the screen. So these are some words that this neuroscientist has been very carefully not using in this entire video. And then as soon as you get on someone else who's an expert, who's aware that they're talking with an expert, out comes more words. Yeah. Yeah. We're playing some sort of children's party game. The past, the present.
I'm quite interested in his posture, to be honest. So he's still leaning forward, as we've established. But I'm just wondering whether it comes from, the field of pragmatics more so. It's like, he doesn't want to threaten his face, as we would say. So it's trying to save someone's positive and negative face as well. So would that kind of play into it? So he doesn't want to come, at this entrepreneur, I think, in very, I don't want to say aggressive manner, but he doesn't want to threaten him too much in this case. That's why he still bends down.
Yeah, so maybe he's doing this sort of non-threatening attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is still performing for the camera because there's still a camera there. So there's, I think it'd be interesting to see what they do when the camera turns off, which we can't see. There he's still leaning forward. But the what happens when the camera turns off? He's like, oh yeah, okay, that was fun. See you later. So we don't know that. I'm gonna not watch as much of the later stuff because I think you guys know what it looks like for experts to talk to experts. But this is. Can we get back to the slides, Fabi? So this is figuring out one example of this isn't necessarily going to show us everything that's going on, but thinking about other types of explanations that you're reading or seeing in your lives can help you think about okay, what is this person doing? What sorts of strategic choices are they making? Great. So we've seen this one. This is really great. Oh, okay. Zoom slides aren't all right. We will give it a few minutes to share. I see. It's very picky. Okay. So this is a tweet. You've had time maybe to read the tweet. If not, feel free to read it. Or it's on Blue Sky, but still a tweet. So I blanked out the people's names here because I don't want to criticize them for doing what I think of as a sort of halfway towards communication thing here. What do you notice about this message? How do kids and adults figure out who is the boss? Looks like kids base their judgments on physical parameters, while adults rather consider behavior. For more details, check out our new preprint with the following people. Yeah.
I would start with looks like.
Looks like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of trying to be informal, right? It's cool.
Yeah, but then it's if it's a room or somebody sat on a bench somewhere near a house.
I actually found this. We did a whole study.
Yeah. So it's best if you, I don't know, rephrase it somehow to actually reflect the fact that you've spent time and effort and you
anything else?
That you have the result.
Yeah.
So the first thing I noticed, and I was going to say this as a joke, but I think it's actually quite relevant in linguistics. I noticed the spelling mistake. How do kids and adult figure out?
That's
exactly
which typo. Yeah.
No, but that first I was just sort of in my head. I thought, oh, there's the first thing I noticed is a typo. Ha ha ha. But actually, if we're communicating linguistics, we sort of have this I would think that the audience has an expectation from us as linguists to always get language correct. Okay. And that something like that might be something that the audience might get sort of hung up on and be like, wait, if they can't even spell things correctly, why are they trying to tell me something. I don't know. It's just a thought I had.
It's fine. I think there's something else that I'm looking for here. Not that this is a challenge to see what you notice, but
it feels like that this is not targeted to a general audience. It's targeted to an audience that knows a lot of background already. Like
what makes you think that?
The second sentence looks like kids base their judgment on physical parameters, adults consider behavior. It's like there's this whole body of research that this is referring to, that it draws on, like with these kind of fairly simple phrases, but it's clear that it's sort of tapping into a paradigm that the reader is expected to already know.
Do you guys agree that you think this is aimed for a general audience or not a general audience, or?
I'm quite that I'm interested in but I've heard of that from
this and anytime in the past, maybe not just like 13 years, well, for 13 years old, this is really important, I guess. Yeah, I think it sounds fine for me. I like it.
Okay, is that a good sign or a bad sign if you like it and you're an expert in that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
One small comment too. If this is for a regular person and they click on the preprint, like,
yeah,
is the text gonna be suitable for a non-academic person?
Do non-academics know what a preprint is? Yeah, I'm not sure.
You could do like a little Twitter thread then explaining everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing about like simplifying something on Twitter, because like, of course you can pick 100 things about this one sentence that looks like kids base their judgment on, etc. Like when I do such a thing, there will be like 5 people who will pick on like, what is a kid? What is a judgment? What is the situation? Whatever. But for that, it's great that they actually have the paper, so they can silence those, like, go read it if you are really that interested. I actually really like this. I don't know what's not good about it, because it has the one thing that is interesting to everyone. And there is also like a link for actual specialists.
So yeah, any further comments?
Emojis would be great.
Yeah.
I also kind of feel like in those situations, like the average person who's not an academic in that field, or like just more interested, maybe like, I don't know, a YouTuber who's like doing commentary videos and things like that, or something like that, they're not going to read the paper. They just take this one sentence and they're like, oh, this is the one thing I learned. So yeah, you have to kind of really be careful with like, is this the one sentence you want people to take away from your research?
Yeah, behind you.
I got the idea that it would be even more engaging if they started, how do we find out who the boss is? Because there is already this assumption that we know that kids and adults find it out differently, and it's more complicated. So, but we all do find out somehow who the boss in the room is.
So if you were trying to replicate this study based on the information in this tweet, what additional information would you need to try to replicate it?
Yeah.
So the question that I have on reading this is, looks like kids base their judgment on physical parameters. What physical parameters? Is this like you base your judgment on who is wearing the brightest colored t-shirt? Or is it like who has the biggest eyes or the longest hair, or maybe is the tallest or the shortest or the biggest or the smallest? What is a physical parameter here? Because they're making a generalization about physical parameters, but they're not saying what the parameter is. Yeah.
My question would be about the definition of a kid. It's been long to show who do you find as a kid. Adults are more easily online, the age limitation of kids. Are we talking about
kids that are kindergarten? Are we talking about kids that are about to hit their, I don't know really. So that definition.
So what the kid age is, what the adult age is. Are the adults like university students? So they're like 18, which might not be the exact same as 40-year-olds. And also, but my other question is, physical parameters. What is a physical parameter? Also, kids consider behavior. What is behavior? What do, like, is this the person who is like singing the most? Like, what is behavior in the context of this study? Because as someone mentioned, this is in conversation with the literature that's looking at various things that can be considered physical parameters, or various things that can be considered behavior as part of a larger category. But what they actually tested is probably something more specific than that, because you have to test a specific behavior. You can't just test, like, is it the person who is sitting versus the person who is standing? Like, what is behavior in this context? It's not that it's not a behavior or not a physical parameter, but in the context of explaining things to the public or simplifying things to the public, sometimes there's a tendency among academics to use words that are more general. So this tweet from the first line seems like it's trying to be very vernacular, and then in the second part, it gets more and more scientific, which is what makes it really, really interesting as a thing to analyze. How do kids and adults figure out who's the boss? We could have some quibbles about this sentence, but it seems like it's kind of engaging. The second sense, it doesn't use any words that I think a layperson wouldn't understand. Preprint may be one of them. But it doesn't use any words the person might understand, but it is very general. And in fact, I did click through to the abstract, which is, so here, we can see down below, there are two types of cues that they had, which is, did the other person provide or refuse to help someone else? And is the person taller? So these were the two things they were testing. And I think this tweet would read a little bit differently if it said, kids base their judgments on who's taller, and adults rather consider unhelpful people the boss. Or adults base their judgments on whether the person was previously helpful. Is it simplifying to add this level of detail? I don't actually think it is. I think it is more precisely reporting the actual thing that you researched. But I notice this tendency among people who are trying to communicate something to say, I'm going to be more abstract, that'll be easier. In many cases, being more concrete, that's easier for people to understand if you give the specific details of what's going on in the study, which can help us with some of this worry that we're actually dumbing things down, because giving more of the precise details is actually reflecting the study more precisely and accurately, rather than sort of giving this bigger picture version. Yeah.
So I agree. And I think, but I think one reason they do this, and this is definitely, like you can find analogies in linguistics, where there's this tension between reporting something more specific and talking about what we actually investigated versus why is it relevant more generally. Yeah. And so if we've investigated something in Estonian, to take a random example, then if we're reporting on it in this kind of very general space and very limited limited length, then is it better to say something that's super general because that makes it more relevant to more people? Or is it, who knows? It depends on who you're talking to. It depends on, what the actual examples are. But, are we talking about specific case forms or or vowels or whatever, or are we talking about something very general because that can apply to more and we have this problem where studies about English and very majoritarian languages are taken as being generally indicative, even though English is an outlier on many parameters, versus studies about Estonian and other smaller languages, like, well, have you considered including an English control group? And you never ask the English speakers, have you considered including an Estonian control group to make sure that this is not something that's only true of English speakers, which would arguably be a more scientifically valid thing to do, is make all of the English speaker studies include control groups from other languages. But I'm not the emperor of the world, so I can't make that happen. But it's a good tension. And I think in this case, it's relatively clear that maybe it would be helpful to actually see what's going on there. But in other cases, it's less clear-cut about what to do in that case. And it can depend more on who you're talking to. And are you saying,
Am I trying to make this something that seems more relevant for a broader group or making a bigger claim? Am I trying to make something that's making a sort of smaller claim, a more specific claim that I have the exact details of what's going on?
And at the same time, like with this study, probably they're not interested in whether kids base their judgments on height specifically, but rather this comparison between behavior and height, and the height and whatever the behavior was is just an example of that difference between kids and adults.
Right. And nonetheless, it is the only thing they tested.
Right, exactly.
You know, if they wanted to test like several different factors, like the person who's wearing a uniform versus the person who's not wearing a uniform, or other physical parameters, then maybe they have more of a claim to make this broader, more of a basis to make this broader claim, because they actually, like, when I was reading the tweet, I was like, oh, surely they've tested multiple physical parameters. Surely they've tested multiple behaviors. Actually, they have not in this particular study. And, you know, science is very incremental. This is a study that was done with some students. I'm sure it's very nice. And this is why I'm not putting the authors' names up, because I don't want to be like, these people did a bad job. And ultimately, someone can write a meta-analysis of like 17 studies that are like this and say, okay, we've learned that the following physical parameters are relevant for children and the following behavioral parameters are relevant for adults, and so on and so forth. But in the case of, it is an illustration of this thing of this tension of how precise you get. So we're going to be talking about a variety of groups here. This is not to say that like everyone has to become good at explaining things to all groups. Like personally, I don't do children. I don't explain linguistics to children. I don't try to explain linguistics to children. I don't go into schools. Sometimes teenagers find my podcast and listen for themselves, which is great, but I don't, and I do have some like high school teachers and stuff that assign it, but I don't, and we do a few things to make it not hostile to children, like we don't swear on the podcast, but that's mostly so that like parents can feel comfortable putting it on around their children. It's not so much because we think we actually have a lot of children who listen. And also we don't talk about like alcohol on the podcast because there are a variety of reasons people might not want to talk about alcohol. Like I'm happy to have a drink, but also it's never necessary to say, oh, you have to talk about this while you're having a beer. You can just say, oh, you can talk about this while you're having a nice hot chocolate or something. And then it's a little bit more friendly to a slightly broader group in a very subtle way, which is also that some adults may have complicated relationships with alcohol, that this just makes it a little bit more friendly, but it is not actually tailored for children. And like, I don't go to schools and work with people. I'm doing stuff that's sort of publicly facing in a media context, but I'm not doing this sort of media-based stuff, this sort of school-based stuff. That said, I think it's great when people go to schools, but we're a large group of people. There are other people also who do linguistics communication. We don't all have to communicate to everybody. And we may do a better job if we pick some group that we feel comfortable with, that we enjoy doing more, and specialize in that rather than saying, oh, I'm a failure because I'm not doing everything. You can be more targeted. So this is to say we can talk about a few different potential groups to target. So we're going to talk about audiences and some examples of projects that are more and less defined for a specific audience. So this is also where you can get some like LingComm inspiration of like, oh, here are some people who are doing some cool stuff. And then talk about media type, like categories of media from a marketing perspective, and then depending on how we do for time, we can get to some practice. So these are the three questions that I'm always thinking about whenever someone's describing their LingComm project to me. Who are you trying to reach? Where are they? What do they want? If you came yesterday, these are the same questions. And if you're able to do this, you can also see what are the other types of things that people make that reach an audience like this. So when we made Lingthusiasm, we're influenced by nerd comedy and the science and history of food. And so the kinds of people that we're trying to reach, so this is a version of our website. It's a little bit further down. And we have a few things here that says, okay, we're one of the top 50 science podcasts because we're trying to appeal to the kinds of people who like science podcasts. Or we have BuzzFeed calling us joyously nerdy. If you don't want to listen to a nerdy podcast, you should pick a different podcast. Because you can appeal more strongly to a smaller group of people and they'll like you more than if you're trying to say, oh, everybody who ever uses language should listen to this podcast. I think it's too niche for some people. And then we have here, someone who has a linguistics blog who says, yeah, this is, these people know their stuff. And we have someone else here who is a person who makes comics online who says, yeah, it was funny. And people think I'm funny. So when I say something's funny, you can believe me because it's very hard to say we're funny. And people are like, are you though? One of the things, enthusiastic about linguistics is a way of understanding the world around us. This also is framing that appeals to the kinds of people who like science podcasts or nerdy podcasts or podcasts that combine nerd stuff with humor, and where the hosts have a rapport. And it's not primarily an interview-based podcast because there's a certain type of podcast that people like where it's primarily the same 2 or 3 hosts, and the hosts have this chemistry between them. This is one way of doing things. There are other linguistics podcasts that are doing something that is different, and there are people who like them instead. But this is a way of saying we have decided here's what our audience is like, and we can appeal to them more strongly rather than trying to make a language podcast that everyone ever is going to like, which means that ultimately fewer people like it as much. So this is something, and this is something that's also evolved. Like we started making the podcast and we had like some inspiration, but we were sort of keeping on thinking of it, and we redesigned the website a few years ago. And also like some of the stuff about positioning, and we have like a lot of podcasts will make as their logo something about like a recording microphone. Can anyone tell me what you think the problem might be with that? So a lot of people will make a podcast and they'll put as their logo or on their website the microphone that they record into as podcasters.
Very informative about the podcast.
So first of all, it's like you recording to a microphone just like every other podcast. It's very similar. Yeah, it doesn't tell you much about it. What else?
It's not actually related to what the people are experiencing when they listen to the podcast.
Right. The microphone is what the podcaster is experiencing when they make the podcast, but it's not actually what the listener is experiencing when they're listening to the podcast. I can't scroll down because this is a screenshot. If you scroll down, we have like a link to episodes, and we have an image of headphones, which is your experience listening, even though it's not our experience making. And instead, we're using a picture here that is creating an atmosphere, which is like 2 different cups of tea and some cookies. And so you think, okay, this is going to be like sitting down for a cozy chat with some people. It's got a sort of friendly atmosphere doing that. And the mugs have little nerdy symbols on them. So there's a little bit of that in the experience. Here's another example of some people doing LinkCom. So these are some linguists who run experiments and engagement activities with people who are visiting this particular language museum in Washington, D.C. in the US. So let's go through these questions. Who are they trying to reach? The visitors to the museum? Who's the museum trying to reach? It's a hard question, but let's try.
Everybody.
Well, I haven't been to this museum. Has anyone here been to this museum?
I would go if I were there.
Okay. Oh, if you were there.
Yes, people who are interested.
People who are interested in the language, people who are in Washington, D.C., either for a visit or they live there. So something you may not know about Washington, D.C. is they have a lot of museums there. There's all the Smithsonian museums are in Washington, D.C., and most of them they're all free to go to. So they've also made their museum free because they're sort of competing with the people who go to these other museums. But a lot of people go on holiday to Washington and they say, because I'm on holiday, I'm going to go to lots of museums because it's a good city for museums. So they have this kind of thing. What kinds of people go to a museum?
Higher education.
People with kids go to a museum. People with higher education go to a museum. What other kinds of groups? Tourists? Retired people, yeah. Maybe school field trips. Yeah. So they have a couple ages, and this isn't on the thing, so you can't know it, but when I was talking with people who were running this museum, and they had a very clear idea in their mind that all of the exhibits had to be understandable by a 10 to 12-year-old, because that's the age they're targeting for school groups. And so if families are bringing their kids, and they say, okay, this is my kids are 8 and 10, is this a good museum for them? Probably it's okay. My kids are 2 and 4, is this a good museum for them? Not necessarily. My kids are 22 and 24, is this a good museum for them? Maybe, yeah. So they're not trying to say everybody with kids, all ages can come to this museum. Sure, all ages can come to this museum, but for some kids it's going to be too much above their heads, and maybe they can still enjoy some of the aspects. Like when you bring a 2-year-old to a museum, unless it's like a children's museum, you expect them to not understand everything, and it's also for the parents, and you have some toys and stuff. So, but saying that like this group of linguists is engaging with people who are at this particular museum. This museum is engaging with a particular group of people who, maybe they're students who are in a school group who don't have any particular interest in language, but they're the target age. Maybe it's adults who are tourists who do have an interest in language and aren't the target age. This is a specific type of, they're thinking about their audience very specifically. Who are they? Where, who are you trying to reach? Where are they? They have to be in Washington, D.C., right? They have a website, but it's not the whole museum. If you're not in Washington, D.C., sorry, this is not, you have to get there sometime, or it's not your museum. So it's very clear, and this is a museum in a particular location that's relatively easy to get to. So having something that's geographically limited, you can provide this really cool multimedia experience for people who are right here in one location. The third question is, what do people who visit this museum want?
Have a good time.
Mm-hmm. What does it look like to have a good time at a museum?
Well, you have a lot of interesting new stuff that you can engage in, that makes you think, you broadens your horizon, and you talk about it with your parents when you left.
Yeah. Yeah, so you want to learn things, you want to interact, engage. In this particular one, part of the appeal is that the people visiting the museum will meet real scientists and meet real linguists. They'll participate in real studies, which, like, many of us have probably participated in a study or two because they often recruit undergraduates. But if you're going to a museum, maybe you haven't been in a study and it's an interesting experience for you to be physically in a study. The way they promoted this museum, so once you get people in the door of the museum, you're promoting this particular study. The way they get people in the door of the museum, how do people find out about a museum they might want to go to?
Google museums in Washington.
Yeah, so maybe they're going to Google museums in Washington. Do I want to go to this? How do you end up in the results when someone is Googling museums in Washington that I might want to go to? Yeah. But one of the things that they did when they were opening is they reached out to journalists to try to get journalists to say, hey, there's a new museum opening. This is what it's like. They offered, actually, I think the museum is free, but they offered some like special tours for journalists and influencers who might say, oh, here's this cool museum that's new, that's open. They have people like me who are on the advisors of the museum. So we talk about it to people that we know who are interested in linguistics and language, even though I haven't been there. I'm like, yeah, it's probably pretty cool. I think one day I'll go. I hope so. So talking to people who might have an audience that's interested in language, even if they're not in DC, talking to people who are in the city who might have an audience, even if it's not specifically interested in language, it's like, cool new museum. So these are some ways of helping people find out about stuff that they could do. Let's move on to another one. So these photos are from slides that I saw at the SLE, because they had a session about linguistics outreach. So I wanted to include some of the projects that people had done there. So this is the University of PV. It's somewhere in Italy. Don't remember which university it is. Because I took the photos of the slides and then I realized afterwards that I could put them in this presentation. So I don't remember which university it is. But it's definitely in Italy. So their project was relatively specific. And they wanted to get these focus groups together to talk about how Italian media depicts domestic violence situations in terms of what words do they use. Do they say this was a tragedy? Or do they say that like this guy did this thing? That sort of how much they give agency to the perpetrators versus the victims. It's kind of a depressing topic. They seem to have gotten a lot of engagement for it. I'm like, I don't know if I would have gone to that, honestly, because like it's very depressing. But they picked this topic that, and they said that the students had these sorts of very impassioned responses to it. So I guess it worked really well for their thing. So I don't know all of the details about this kind of project, but if you're running a project like this, who are they trying to reach? Or who might be some people that a project like this could try to reach? Yeah. Yeah. So the young adult category here, they're doing some like word games, crossword puzzles thing. So it might be related to people who like word games or crossword puzzles. They're trying to be sort of specific about their audience, and all of their events are also in person. They're bringing either existing university students or students in high schools, things like that. Where is their audience?
It should be in the town of the university.
That I forget what university it is. This is my fault. Yeah, PV is like, it's not Padua, it's somewhere like that. So again, they're trying to reach a local audience. Pavia. Okay, wow, I was so close. Pavia. And how are they doing something that is appealing to what people want or what they find interesting? Yeah, so they have these very bright, eye-catching posters that's doing a good job at like bringing people's attention. And they're doing this very emotionally charged topic, which seems to be engaging their audience, that people find like very relevant to their lives. Okay, here's another completely different option. So these are from two different YouTube channels. One of which is this guy, Tom Scott, who produces various kinds of nerdy videos, some of which are about linguistics. Another which is Crash Course Linguistics, or Crash Course, which is a YouTube channel that makes various videos about like, here's outbreak science, like pandemics, Black American history, zoology, geography, linguistics. And they produce videos that are around like a first year university, last year of high school sort of level, for people who are interested in topics, but they have other viewers who are different ages as well, who just like learning things because maybe like I never got the chance to learn zoology when I was in school. Like maybe that's really cool, right? So they produce all sorts of videos. So when we're thinking about making linguistics videos online, who are we trying to reach?
Anyone who is interested in language and language science, like find curiosity towards this topic.
Yeah, so people who are curious about language science. Any other ways of thinking about people we're trying to reach? Schools. So maybe like teachers would use some of this type of stuff in schools, or first year teachers who are teaching intro linguistics might use some of it in schools.
There might be also some age difference actually comparing with the other posters before. Okay, I'm from Italy as well. And I see these posters around many times in Italian cities, and usually they are designed to appeal maybe an older audience, which is not very much digitalized. It's like their presence online maybe is. I mean, right now, of course, like people who are like who have like a certain age might also be on the internet, but their usage of the internet is different from younger people, younger generations. So maybe younger people might be more appealed by this kind of videos, whereas older people might feel that such a serious topic might be addressed better by this kind of events.
Yeah. So younger people who already watch YouTube videos, these are all sort of brightly colored. They look a little bit silly, a little bit cartoony, maybe. So people, this is a more, yeah.
Because they are more tech-savvy digital
yeah,
digital natives, as you said. So
yeah. So maybe younger people who like this sort of thing. What else about for both of these cases, these two channels, and I didn't put up the other videos that Tom Scott makes, but he'll do video that's like, oh, I went to this cool, I don't know, like windmill or something, or here's this like big machine that does this thing. So some of his videos are like, oh, I went to this place and I saw the biggest, I don't know, wind turbine. And so like machines and like the oldest computer that someone has made. And other sort of technological topics, and then sometimes he does linguistics. The crash course people, they do sometimes zoology or geography or science, and sometimes they do linguistics. So their audience is not only people who are interested in language. How could we describe the rest of their audience?
I think they're just people who want to kill time, they can't sleep. I really don't like this approach, which is like, I have to talk to those people who have the interest in something, because like, I know myself and I know pretty much about everybody that anything that looks like it's interesting, I will click on it and watch it.
Mm-hmm. So, you're watching these videos about geography, rocks, like, do I care about rocks? But maybe this person is interesting about rocks. And then now you're like, okay, well, now there's a video about language that shows up in my suggested videos because it's the same channel. Okay, I'll click on that, even though I don't necessarily think in advance I'm interested in this. But people who are interested in like using videos to learn things. And like, I will confess, I don't really like watching videos to learn things. I would rather read. But some people really like to learn things by watching videos. And so people who like to learn things by watching videos in general, whether it's about old computers or windmills or rocks or language, this can be one way to say, oh, well, you like learning stuff. Here's some more stuff to learn. So this is one way of sort of, you could have back many years ago, I had a project where we tried to make some online videos, and we weren't like partnering with any sort of channel. It was just like me and some friends, and we had a video camera, and we did this sort of low res thing, and it was way more work than we thought it was going to be, especially the editing. It was way more work than we thought it was going to be. And when I was collaborating on some of these projects, I had a linguist come up to me at a conference and was like, yeah, I really like the videos that you made with Crash Course. I was wondering if you could give me any advice for how to make videos more like this for the videos I'm teaching with. Like, this was very pandemic era, post-pandemic. Like, I keep making these classroom lecture videos and they're not very interesting or engaging. Can you teach me how to do that? And I was like, yes, the first step is you get a 6-person production team. So first, your university hires 5 people to help you. And 2 of them are animators, and one of them is a video editor, and another person is doing the graphic design to make everything look pretty, and someone else is writing a script or being the host who's very charismatic. Like, I didn't host this. I was not on camera. I just wrote them some words and they said the words. So I think sometimes we could hold ourselves to unrealistic standards when like these videos were worked on by many people, each of whom was a specialist in a particular area. And so that doesn't mean that we need to hold ourselves to those standards as academics, but it does mean that sometimes collaborating on a project, especially someone who has an existing audience, like both of these channels, Crash Course has like 14 million subscribers. So some of them are going to say, oh, I joined this channel because they were talking about rocks, but maybe I could be interested in language also. Okay. Here is another thing from SLE. And this was, so maybe we can just read these because they're already almost doing this thing. Who are they trying to reach? Read it off the slides. Linguistics to schools in Finland. Already this is a relatively narrow target, but then they're saying linguistics to schools in Finland where the L1 is Swedish, and actually we're working at this one school. I think actually they had 3 schools where they had L1 Swedish, and it was because one of the guys on the project was like, well, I'm employed at one of these schools, so we're going to reach this school where I am employed. And this is a much more realistic approach to start a project, is to say, we're going to reach kids at this one school where I already know someone. And then if you make a good project, so linguistics for schools in Swedish, they wanted to do like a science center, like a museum. They said in the presentation, we wanted to call it a science museum, but the students didn't like that. So now we're calling it a science center because they thought a museum would be boring. So they're paying attention to what their target audience wants and saying, oh, you don't like museum? Okay, we'll say center. And so they made, and the teachers wanted a practical resource that can be used in class. And so they made this online resource, which is all in Swedish and has these different things. You can click on them to go into the different sections. This is like cornerstones. So one of these is society, history, languages of the world, language learning for kids. And so they made this and they tested it with, and you click on those and eventually you end up with like longer descriptions. They tested it with their students. They got a lot of feedback from the students that said, okay, this is boring. They said the students wanted more little like animations that would do fun things when you click on them. So they're getting this very direct feedback from the students in the one school that they're working with. I think it was like 3 classes of students. And then you can get, okay, if we expand to this other school, it's because we've gotten direct feedback about how this works from this one school. And they said, you know, one of the things they want to do is translate it into Finnish so they can use it elsewhere in Finland, which makes sense. And maybe they could even translate it into other languages as well. But this is reaching a very specific thing. Whereas if they'd said, okay, we're going to make a website. Who's the website for? Everyone who uses the internet. They're going to make it in this sort of untargeted way. They make a website that's useful for people at this one school. And now a lot of people from the audience are saying, oh, this is great. We could translate this into Dutch. Great. And some parts are going to translate sort of better and worse into another language. But being very specific doesn't stop you from being more general later. It lets you say, okay, we've tested this with like 60 students, 100 students, and they've given us feedback. And now when we expand it a little bit more, it's because we know that this works with at least one group of kids. So doing this sort of test. So these are some articles that I've written for mainstream newspapers. So who am I trying to reach when I'm writing an article like this?
So Wired is read widely by the tech community. So
right. So Wired is read by tech people. This is New York Times. It's just read pretty widely by a lot of people. So I'm trying to reach the kind of people who read newspapers, who maybe trust newspapers. But in order to write these articles, which are for fairly well-known newspapers, I also wrote a whole bunch of articles for smaller and less well-known places as I was building my way up, because like the first time that I pitched the New York Times, they didn't accept me. And then I went and I wrote for a bunch of other places and gradually built up a reputation. And then several years later, I pitched them again and, oh yeah, okay, now you're more interesting to us because you've been doing this. So I'm trying to appeal to the editor who controls whether I can publish the article. And the editor is trying to act as a proxy for who their readers are, which is a predominantly American audience, but not entirely. A lot of international people also read these sites. They're trying to project who they think is going to read it and whether they think it would be interesting and something that they want to publish and something that they haven't already published on recently and this sort of stuff. So the where are they? These sites already have readers and listeners and people who pay attention to them. Here's a really neat one from SLE. So this was a project to do workshops on metaphor design with physicists to help them devise metaphors that they could use in their science communication using linguistic skills of metaphors. And these are metaphor researchers who were doing this. So who is the audience here?
Physicists.
Sort of physicists. Yeah, and also this sort of like quantum experts and non-experts, it's also the people that physicists are trying to reach. So to us, physicists are part of the general public. To physicists, we are part of the general public, which is also why there isn't one general public. And to both of us, people who have done neither linguistics nor physics, which is quite a lot of people, are part of this group you're trying to reach. So this is another way of sort of thinking about different kinds of things. This is a board game that I was told about at SLE, which is, I can only find a description in French, so apologies for that. But it is welcome to the most cosmopolitan restaurant in the world. Here, the clients of the whole world come to order dishes in languages that you have never heard someone speak and that you have no idea how to speak. And so the idea is that I haven't played it, I don't know how it works, but it's some sort of multilingual kind of game. And they made it to try to do this sort of language experience. So if you were designing a game like this, who could you think about as your target audience for a board game?
Someone who's familiar with RPA.
So definitely their name is in IPA. I don't know if that's more like stylistic effects, but I don't know. I don't think the game itself requires you to speak IPA, but it is there on the box. You're right.
International students.
So maybe this is international students, or maybe it's people who work with international students because you want them to gain more like empathy for the experience of not being able to speak a language or something like that. Yeah. Has anybody here ever played a board game? Oh, good. A few of you. How did you decide what game to play?
Which one they forced me to?
So you had some friends who wanted to play it with you?
Yeah. Whether or not it had IPA on the box.
I only play board games with IPA on them, personally. So I think a game can be I would find it challenging to promote a game because it's not something I'm used to promoting. But I think people who are very into board games, they have like websites where they post reviews of like, here's what I liked about this board game, here's what I didn't like about this board game, and they like read the reviews of this sort of stuff. So if I were saying, oh, I want to promote this board game, I would be saying, how do people find out about new board games? Who are people who are like really keen on trying new board games? And could I like find some people, if someone has like a YouTube channel where they play board games and they give a review of them, can I get them a free copy to see if they'll review it on their channel or something like that? Or could I host like a game night at the university maybe with some students and give people free food and maybe they would come? And because you sort of want this word of mouth, people telling each other that this board game is fun. But in order to do that, we need to seed it with some people who find out about what's going on. But I think for me, it would be a challenge because I've never promoted something like that before. This is also a video game. So this is it's got a language puzzle in it. So you can play the video game and you encounter all these strange symbols and you're trying to figure out what they mean. I've also not played it because I'm not very keen on video games, but like some people like video games. And there are also ways that people find video games in particular. Who is this trying to reach? People who like video games? I don't know, probably smaller group than that.
Historical linguists.
Pardon?
I mean, if you're enthusiastic about scripts, for example.
Right. So if you like scripts, and maybe if you like sort of puzzles or something like that, it says award-winning narrative adventure game. So they've gotten reviews from Wired and from PC Gamer, which are companies that review games. And so if you read these places that say, oh yeah, this game was really good. They've gotten endorsements from people who say that this is good. PC gamer, I don't know what they are, but presumably people who actually like games are like, oh yeah, these people are people that can be trusted to review games that have opinions about that. So since it's after lunch, and I feel like the energy is going down because everyone's a little bit sleepy, we're going to do an activity before we go on. So I want to get everybody, do we have enough space to make a circle? Yeah, I think we can manage it. Maybe we can push this table back if that's not too bad. Get everybody up and make a circle. Okay, we make a bit of a circle here. I'm sorry, people on Zoom, you're gonna have to figure out what you're doing. Okay, but more a circle. I want to everybody can see each other. We can see each other. Okay, so what I have here is I have a ball, and I can throw this to somebody. When I throw it, you can catch the ball. Yeah. And then you can throw it to someone else. Everyone's going to pay very close attention to see where the ball is. Because the only way you're going to know is if someone is acting like they're holding a ball. Everyone familiar with the ball?
Oh, yeah.
You've thrown a ball before at some point in your life.
Yeah.
The best thing about throwing an invisible ball is there's no way you can miss it. Because even if it's like, oh, it's a bit high. Okay, I got it. So no one has to go chase away against the ball that goes away. You don't have to have skill or talent in throwing and catching things. You get this very forgiving ball that can be caught by you. So when you're throwing the ball with someone, you need to make eye contact with them to make sure they're ready to receive the ball from you. Okay? Because you're not just going to like, oh, who is that for? So I can make eye contact. Ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. You get problems.
Yeah.
The ball has gotten much bigger. We're throwing an invisible, very large ball. Oh boy. Everybody ready? Okay. Now we're gonna throw very, very gently and nicely, we're gonna throw baby. I don't think this thing is very forgiving. It's thrown at you.
It peed on me.
Hey, this baby has now become an angry cat. Now an angry cat.
Oh my God. Scratched me.
All right. So why do I have to play this game other than that it gets us moving? This is also a game about listening and paying attention very carefully to each other. So what did you notice about paying attention and listening or like this game? Was it hard in the end? No.
I was saying cricket.
It was hard, and I made it go from easier, like the ball, pretty easy. The baby is harder. The angry cat is even harder. And so we started with something easier and gradually made it more hard. We didn't start like, right, okay, I'm throwing an angry cat. Oh my God, what do I do? So this is partly, getting to something that's more and more complex. Did you feel nervous? At the beginning. Yeah, but gradually I could see everybody's laughing or sort of having a good time. Towards the end. How easy was it to picture, oh yeah, this person has something they're kind of throwing me and pass to me? By the end, it felt like I almost felt like there was a real cat or a real baby. Oh my God, I dropped it again. So one of the things that is really helpful when we're doing linguistic communication is to be paying attention to the reaction of people we're talking with. Saying, does this person seem like they're engaged, like they're having a good time? Do they seem like they're they're bored, they're falling asleep, they're not following, they're disengaged. And getting better at paying attention to playing in a game is one of the sort of skills you can practice for getting better at paying attention to people in communicating with them. And also, I was paying attention to the room and I was like, oh, we need a game now. Because everybody's sort of tired after lunch. We're gonna have a little nap. We can't have a little nap, but at least we can play it. Okay, we can go back to our seats.
Okay.
No? Here we go. Okay. So let's talk about people we're trying to reach. I'm going to actually skip these slides because we looked at them yesterday. And talk a bit more about the three main categories of getting people's attention. So this comes to us from like marketing and media theory. So there's the first one is paid media. Can anybody think of some examples of paying to get people's attention? Yeah. Yeah, so like sponsored content, if you know, here's this influencer who has 1 million followers, I'm going to give them $1,000. Now they're going to post a photo that says, hey, try my cool product. Linguistics, it's cool. Something else?
You pay for a booth at the opinion festival in Haida in Nova Estonia and get people to, and it's like go to where there's the public interested and eager to attend debates and then reach a wider public that way.
Yeah, so you can pay for a booth at a festival. I want to hear more about the opinion festival. I think it's really neat. You can pay to participate in some sort of booth. Any other examples? There's some very obvious examples of paid.
To promote a course.
Yeah, so you can pay for like advertising. Yeah, I mean, often we don't think like, oh, you know, try cool Coca-Cola, or you know, buy the new iPhone. Linguistics, it's cool. We don't think about this because we don't necessarily have the budget to do that sort of advertisement, but it is technically possible. It's sort of interesting to think that it's possible. Any other thoughts about paying for?
Yeah. Just came to my mind that like you maybe don't know when you haven't traveled with Linguistics the bus.
Okay.
But there's a screen on the back of the seat. And there was an advertisement of the English language course. I almost jumped off my seat.
Was really good. Wasn't it? I think the like people who applied was like a really good number of people. I think that's due to
Cool.
Yeah, so like paid advertisement. Any other examples of how you can pay for people's attention?
YouTube. Yeah, I don't know how it works, but well, but you are interrupted in between your YouTube video. You're forced to.
Yeah. So there's physical advertisements like the sign in the seat on the bus, or like, you know, a billboard or some sort of like poster that you put up somewhere where you have to pay to do that. And there's also digital advertisement. So I don't really know how YouTube ads work either, but I know that a lot of like sites like Facebook or Instagram will try to say like, do you want to boost your post? Would you like to pay us money so it will be seen by more people? Often we don't have the budget for this, but like technically it's a possibility. Yeah.
Platforms like Meta, on all the products they have third party, but they share information with third party, and so basically the algorithm knows what I like and what I don't like. So that, and these ads, what was mentioned, I think they will come to me if I'm interested in, let's say, linguistics, or I'm based in Estonia, if I'm a male or a female, or like what age group.
Yeah, so sometimes you could they try to target ads. I haven't done very much with paying for advertisement, but we did pay one time when we were having some live shows for linguistics in Australia, and we were trying to sell some more tickets. And so we had this very targeted thing of like people who live in Sydney, Australia or Melbourne, Australia, and they've liked the page linguistics, like one of these 5 linguistics pages. And maybe there's only like 500 of them, but we want all 500 of them to see our ad. So if you have a very specific audience and also a way to maybe make money off of them later of like, okay, well, we want them to buy tickets, then maybe they would come to something like this. Do you have a thought? You're just stretching, that's fine. So yeah, paid advertisement, paid media, it exists. It's less common, but it's just there on the list for completeness. The other 2 are more common. So the second one is called earned media. And this is a bit of a, like, we're sort of used to the idea that you can pay for this type of thing. Earned media is a very big category that we often don't talk about in a cohesive sort of way like this. So what would be some examples of ways someone else has an audience, you convince them, hey, you should show my thing to your audience? Like, hey, buddy, my new friend. Would you like to show my thing? Yeah?
Specialist in linguistics communication come to your university's town and do workshop, and hope that she's impressed by the people who are here and wants to meet me.
I don't know if anybody liked that. Can you introduce me to this person? She sounds really cool. So yeah, sometimes you sort of do reciprocal favors for people and see if anything comes of that.
Yeah, someone with an audience can be basically a university or a news portal, like which has a wider reach. You write an article there, or you post in your university social media.
Right, exactly. So sometimes, so there's several really good ones in there. So your university may already have places where people are getting their information. If they can post it on the university website where people are visiting it, or send it in an email blast to all the students. And news is also a kind of earned media. So like the journalist who was interviewing me yesterday from your local news broadcaster, I didn't pay her money, she didn't pay me money, but somebody contacted her and sent her a pitch email which says, hey, we have this person coming. She's so famous internationally. You have to talk to her. But this is earned because she says, oh yeah, I think she would be interesting. Because you could send her another pitch email that says, yeah, we have this guy, he's a plumber. You should listen to him talk about linguistics. You'd be like, why? What does he have to say though? So you could send a pitch, and probably you have sent pitches sometimes that don't get replied to. And so the earned is we wrote a pitch that was so compelling, which is the sort of talent, the difficult part, which is we wrote something that was interesting, and this person who is in charge of reaching a larger audience said, yeah, okay, I'll cover that. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier pitching your story to the New York Times, and I think there's 2 ways to earn attention or earn that. One is your name becomes more recognized. The other is you write a better pitch. And because through the experience you gain writing these smaller papers, you're actually earning it in a content way.
Yeah. And like sometimes someone can be very, very famous and they're a terrible writer, but because they're so famous, the media can say, yeah, well, we are going to have to rewrite everything behind the scenes and just pretend it's them writing it. But we want this story so much that we're willing to do that because they're a very famous name. Or you could have someone who's not a very famous name, but they're a really, really good writer. And more often it's a combination of the two. So you're earning the story by doing something that people find interesting. This is also what companies do when they do like a publicity stunt or a PR stunt. So like if you have, I don't know, so my mom worked in PR until she retired. So this is how I know some of these things. And she had at one point, there was this boat that was like a boat that was made to look like this character in a children's cartoon that was also a boat. This is very famous in Canadian media. You've never heard of it. And the boat has a little face, which is smiling, and has a little hat, and he's very cute, and they sell toys of him, and they sell like books, and they used to have a TV program that was very popular when I was a child in Canada. No one outside of Canada has heard of him. It's okay. But so she had this boat who is a beloved figure. His name is Theodore the Tugboat. Anyway, he's very, very beloved in Canadian media. And so she would sometimes, the company owned him, and they also owned some more boring typical boats. But when she needed publicity for the company, she could do something with the boat that would make it look cute. So one time, so early on in the pandemic, she's like, aha, we're going to get some PR because our boat, who has a face, he's going to put a mask on because, it's so important to have social distancing. And he's very sad that no one can ride him right now because, of course, everyone's locked down. But we're going to release a photo of the boat with his little face that has the mask on it. And sure enough, everyone was like, oh my God, it's so cute. There's a mask. So you can think of a story that is somehow a little bit weird. And of course, she's getting positive publicity for her company because it's like, oh yeah, so this boat is owned by the following company, and here's how to ride him once the pandemic is over. But she's also getting this attention by doing something that's sort of weird or cute or interesting that can bring attention to other things that she wants to promote, which is not really the boat is wearing a mask, but the boat is wearing a mask is an excuse for promoting some of the other stuff. But if you said the boring stuff, they're like, oh yeah, that's not that interesting. So sometimes it's something that's intrinsic in the story. Sometimes you do the sort of publicity stunt that has some relationship to the story, but is also just like funny and interesting.
Sorry, I don't know if I can share this, but like in my previous company, they had a campaign. So it's a ride-hailing company, and they had a campaign in Spain. So according to Spanish law, you need to have a certain size of a bumper on both sides of the car. So someone came up with an idea. Instead of buying new cars with big bumpers, they just put a campaign. They extended the bumper and it went viral. Everyone went crazy because it's such a silly thing that you just need a broad bumper to be a taxi. So that was viral everywhere.
So sometimes you make something that's really funny and it can go viral. It's hard to predict what's going to go viral because it's hard to predict. But sometimes doing something funny or cute or engaging, and it doesn't have to go like internationally viral to go viral in your one city or in a smaller area. Any other thoughts about, trying to get people's attention for something?
We did it with the Linguistics department in Hungary. It's just, the Daniela Bondolo's favorite languages, bakery book. What? Louder. Speak up. And I just wanted to motivate myself, and I did like a little piece of paper. I wrote Harry Potter and then the green book, and I don't know. I made a photo of it to show my colleagues, but then I was like, I don't know. I said, okay, let's put it on our Facebook page, like a little motivation for the exam season or whatever. And that's so viral. And I was like, come on, people.
And sometimes it's the stuff that you spent like 5 minutes on that goes viral, and you spent like 3 weeks on it, and then like 2 people see it, and you're like, come on, how am I supposed to control whether people think this is interesting? What are other kinds of, so some of the things we talked about earlier, some of them were convincing someone else that they should show you to your audience.
How do you comment having a PR agency do the earning?
Well, so a PR agent, so I had a publicist, a PR agent, when I was coming up with Because Internet, and she sent emails to so many people, podcasters and journalists and news people and stuff like this. And I ended up doing like 200 media interviews at that time, but I'm sure she sent out 5,000 emails, 1,000 emails to get 200 emails that were interested, because you're going to pitch a lot more than the number of people who are actually interested. And also that these things have a compounding effect. So the first few interviews that I did, were in some cases the hardest ones to get. And then the book became a bestseller, and suddenly some people that we didn't hear back from before were like, oh, well, now this is popular, so now we can talk about it. And then it became like a second round, and then some people mentioned me on other podcasts, and then again, some people that we pitched the first time were like, oh yeah, now we can talk to you because now we're more convinced that you're interesting. So the publicist can shortcut some of the elements of pitching. And I'm sure the university has publicists that they use for some of this pitching. But also some of that is that the best person who actually knows what you can talk about is still going to be you. And if they're still pitching you to talk to that person, ultimately it's you who does the actual interview part of things, but it's a sort of combined relationship. It's also easiest. So like I now get these emails, like anytime somebody writes a pop linguistics book, I'll get an email probably that's like, hey, would you like this book? And it's much easier if I've already seen the person's name somewhere else because I liked an article that they wrote, or I liked an interview that they did on a podcast that I listened to, or I've heard of them from a linguistics conference even or something, than if I'm like, who the hell is this? Because if I'm looking at the email and going, who the hell is this? And why are they writing a book about pop linguistics? And I've never heard of them. Sometimes it's still good. I look them up and I'm like, oh, okay, they're a professor somewhere that I don't visit as much, but like it sounds like they're doing real work. But sometimes I'm like, who the hell is this? Oh no. So yeah, publicity does compound on itself. Like once you have some publicity, it's easier to get more publicity. You know, this is why your local journalist was like, ooh, an exciting person to talk to who has gotten publicity in other countries. You can become much more famous by going to another country. Sometimes this works. You know, when I visited Australia, their media was also very excited to talk to me because they're like, you came all the way to Australia? Whereas like in Canada, they're like, yeah, we know she's here. It's fine. So yeah, sometimes you can do sort of an arbitrage between like, okay, this is cool, and you show that it's cool in one market, which can show that it's interesting in another market. Any other comments?
Do you think the snowballing effects also take place? Like, for example, I'm aware about the book, and when I got to know that they're coming out, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So people talk, so perhaps there's some kind of snowballing as well?
Yeah, one of the big things that publicity is looking for in general is word of mouth, which is very hard to manufacture because in some ways it's the ultimate earned media, is that like I can get a whole lot of publicity for my book, but ultimately people who read it don't like it. It's still not going to be very helpful. You can have like, you've probably read books that you read a lot of recommendations for, and then by the time you read it, you're like, ugh, this is overrated. It wasn't that good. It's, you know, got all these problems. So it's only as good, like the actual product also does affect that. Like you can have a lot of publicity, but if people who are actually reading it or experiencing it aren't having a good time, that's going to be a problem. And generally when something is really good, people often want to recommend it to their friends because at that point it's no longer I'm doing a favor. Like I could say, okay, people are recommending my book because they're doing a favor to me because they like me. I like to think I'm a nice person, but a nice person can still write a book that's really boring. And also a person who is terrible can still write a book that's interesting, unfortunately. So, you know, if the people in the end aren't doing me a personal favor, even though it feels like it's a personal favor to me, they want to do their friends a favor by recommending something that their friends are going to actually like. So yeah, maybe they'll recommend my book up to a point because they like me. But also, if they don't think their friends will enjoy it, if they didn't have a good experience reading it, they also don't want to recommend something to their friends. Their friends are going to say, what, you recommended this to me? Like, why are you doing this? This is awful. And then I'll never read anything else you recommend to me again. Like, you are trying to primarily do a favor to your friends. And when you make something that's really interesting and compelling, people feel like they're doing their friends a favor to tell them about it, not that they're only doing you a favor to tell people about your thing that's kind of meh. So that's part of the thing that we were talking about with like listening very closely to your audience, getting feedback from one round of people before you try to reach a bigger round of people. So if this first round of people is like, yeah, I got bored at this part, you can change this part. And then by the time it gets to the next group of people, they can say, yeah, okay, it was still interesting at that point. Changing things in response to feedback and getting a lot of feedback from people can help you make it so that it's something that people still find interesting. Yeah.
With regards to with regards to the names or like also like the people that are not well known, more like your reaction. For example, you're saying, oh, I don't know this person as much.
Yeah.
And if you maybe search out the name, not much pops up, but it's the idea that they have right reading.
Yeah,
no, so I feel like considerate, you know.
Yeah,
or
it really, at that point, it depends on what happens when I pop it up. So I recently reviewed a book that was by someone who I'd never heard of before, but when I Googled her name, it was like, okay, so she's written some articles for some places that I've heard of. So here's the newspaper, this newspaper that she's written for, here's these articles that she's read that I've heard of, and then I read the shorter articles before I commit to reading the book and say, okay, are the shorter articles something that I think are interesting? So sometimes building a bit of, like building a portfolio as well, because there's less convincing to do for someone to read a short article that's like 800 words than to read a whole book that's like 200, 300 pages. That's just more, it's more effort, right? And so even if I get the book for free, to read the whole book, it's going to take me, I don't know, 5 hours, 10 hours. I could be doing anything else with that time also. So yeah, like, so looking at someone and like looking at what they've done that's sort of smaller and shorter and builds a reputation with some people, even if it's not me. And then I can see like who else, because I don't know everybody who's doing stuff. I don't know everybody. There's a lot of people. But yeah, like what kinds of reputation you have. Like when I started doing this, nobody knew me either. You know, we start somewhere and do various things. What about when so you're convincing someone with an audience that they should convincing someone who has control of the floor for some people, they should direct that group's attention to you, even when they're quite different from that group. That was very vague. A lot of people have talked about doing things in schools. And generally when you're doing things in schools, it's also earned media. You have to convince the teachers or the administrators of the school that it's worth them giving up an hour of class time or more or less to say, yeah, students, children, you should listen to this person. So that's also a way of convincing someone else that they need to direct their attention to you.
How do I do that? Or what exactly is the question?
Yeah, and the question is sort of so any of this kind of thing involves thinking about a problem, a question or issue in two ways. One is, how does it appeal to this one gatekeeper, the editor, or the teacher, or the person who's running the festival or something like this? And another one is, how does it appeal to the actual people who are experiencing it, people who are reading the newspaper, the children, the people who come to the festival, who come to the museum. The same thing with, okay, if we're having a display in a museum, we have to convince the people who run the museum, hey, they want to have a linguistics display. And then also, we need to convince the people who are actually at the museum, okay, this is going to be fun for them.
On the other hand, those the first group, like people working for museums, they are also looking for interesting content. So
yeah. So hopefully these things are aligned. Sometimes people have a skewed idea of what their audience actually wants. So it's not always 100%, but hopefully they know what their audience actually wants. One of the things that I see people often doing when they're starting to do LingComm is starting off their pitches to something like this with me and why I find it so interesting for me and why this is so important to me. Like, I have been researching this topic for 20 years and I think it's very interesting. Great. But why does this explain why this other person and their audience is going to find it interesting for them? It's a hard question. I don't have answers, but this is the sort of question that needs to be considered. Yeah.
I mean, the answer to this question could be that this is applicable in any other area that you could think of, you know? It's not that you're explaining only linguistics to people, you know? I could be also a math teacher, and I could also try explaining it to other students. It's just a matter of you're learning the skill of explaining it to people, making it accessible. That's the gist of it. So.
And also thinking about, you know, it can be the most accessible explanation possible, and yet if it's locked in a box, no one sees it. You know, so I can write a book, and the inside of the book is amazing, and the cover is terrible.
cover, like you have this like Instagram note taking app, like it looks like the way you select.
Oh yeah, like it's selected text.
Your color as well because it's yellow, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you put in a lot of effort.
I did. There was actually an earlier version of the cover for Because Internet where it still had this text selection effect, but it was on a white background and with like a serif font like Times New Roman, like a Word document. And I said back to them, okay, I like the text selection effect, and I understand that editors think of technology and language as Word documents, but users think of technology and languages on their phone. So it needs to look like it's on an iPhone or a smartphone. It shouldn't look like it's in a Word document because that will make the book look like it's more serious than it is. No, well, inside the book it's serif, but the outside of the cover is a sans serif font. And if I look at a comparison of the other pop linguistics books on my shelf, which I have, the ones that are funny have sans serif fonts on the cover. The ones that are serious have serif fonts on the cover. So specifically, if the thing that I want to signal to people is this book is fun, it needs to have more colors and it needs to have sans serif fonts or maybe handwriting fonts. But it can't have Times New Roman and it can't have white. And I didn't say this because I like white more or I like yellow more, right? I said the thing that this is trying to signal, which is in conversation with other things in this genre. So people have expectations because they've read other books before, hopefully, that of what a book like this looks like, what kind of genre this book is trying to signal that it belongs to. And so the fact that the cover is very colorful, and I think you have
how languages change.
Okay, so you have the UK version. And the UK version was produced a couple months after the US version because once they saw that it was doing well in the US, the UK people wanted to do it. And so they changed the subtitle because they thought this would appeal more to UK audiences. But they didn't change the cover concept. And many books get a different cover when they're published in the UK. But in this case, I feel like the cover was very good because the UK people looked at it and said, we can't improve on that. So like sometimes books get a different title in the UK, sometimes books get a different cover, and even several of the translations, so like the Japanese translation also has the same cover concept. The Korean translation and the Spanish translation, which is coming out in like a couple weeks, they have different covers. So there are a few things that people have thought about with different covers, but quite a few people have said, yeah, this one is quite good. But initially we had one that looked more serious. And that could have been good for someone else's book, but this book is quite funny. And so you want to have it convey the thing in the packaging that has it do that. So what's something, here's a question for the room. What's something that you purchased recently, that you bought recently? Several people have bought lunch recently, I think. What's like a physical object that you bought?
Bags for present.
Bags for a present? Okay. How did you decide that you were going to buy this?
Oh, it was easy. It's a present for a boy and a girl. So boyish. Bag.
Okay, great. Yeah. And where did you buy it?
Around bookstore.
Okay. And how did you know that you could buy it there?
Well, I knew that before they sell it.
Had you been in there before for something else and you saw them? And so if someone that was looking, oh, I need to buy some gift bags, you could say, oh, well, they sell it at the bookstore. So when you saw them before, you didn't buy them.
No, I didn't need.
Yeah, you didn't need them before. Yeah. So when people are trying to decide what to buy or what to watch or what to read, sometimes they see it and they don't buy it yet because they say, oh, I didn't need it. But it sticks in their mind, maybe if it looks good, oh, I could come back here and I could buy it when I do need it. So one of the things that we were talking about, I went to lunch with a few of you, is this idea that you need to keep repeating Lincom. And it's very tedious and boring because you're like, but I told them. But this bookstore, it wasn't enough for them to have bags the one time you needed them. They had to have the bags some other times you could come in and see them. Maybe several times you came in and you bought a book or you bought something else, you bought a pen or something, and they had the bags there and you were like, oh yeah, no, I don't need those. And then this time you thought, oh, I need some bags. I could go back there where I've seen them, because you're still seeing it over and over again and repeating yourself. Yeah.
There's a comment online.
Yeah.
And then I have a comment based on that. She says,
yeah, you can read it.
It says, I recently bought 5 hats.
Ooh.
I decided to buy this because there was a deal for a discount on 5 hats. I went to a hat shop to buy them.
And
then my question is there an equivalent of some sort of a deal in linguistics communication? Can you attract people
with a deal?
Equivalent. I mean, this is obviously.
Yeah. I mean, so we sell merch for the podcast, and sometimes there's like a sale or something on the. So it depends, because a lot of us are putting linguistics communication together and trying to make it free, which is certainly one option to do, because it does have the, if someone was just having a stall giving away free hats, probably more people would take a free hat, even if they weren't sure if they wanted it, than would just pay money for a hat that, costs a certain amount. So definitely giving things away free is one way to do things, especially if you have someone else providing funding, like a university or a granting agency or something like that. But that being said, something that both earned media considers is, how will this contribute to my ability to make money? Like the newspaper is selling advertising against your story, and so they need people to click on the story so they can sell more advertising, or so they can sell more subscriptions. For Linguisthiasm, for my podcast, we make money because we have some episodes, the main episodes, that are free, and people can listen to those for free. And then a small percentage of those people decides, okay, we have these other episodes that are bonus episodes that they can pay money for. And so either they want to pay money because they directly want to listen to more stuff. Normally they listen to all of the free stuff first, and then they say, okay, maybe I'll give you some money. So they can listen to more stuff. Or sometimes it's like, oh, I use these in my teaching, I find them really useful. Yeah, I can give you $5 because it's not very much, because this saves me time and effort. Even if I'm not listening to every single episode, people want to support that we're existing. So in that case, we have a few things where if people if they buy a year-long subscription to the bonus episodes, they get a bit of a deal on it. And so some people do that because they're getting a bit of a deal, even though they want to give us money to support us, but they also want a deal, which is the sort of thing. So that part, the deal aspect sort of comes with, how is this kind of a good deal? I have seen sometimes this backfires, because people will be like, oh, you should listen to our thing because it's free. Do you know how much free stuff there is that I could listen to or watch or read? So people are sometimes willing to give money for something if it's really valuable to them. It doesn't have to mean that free isn't the only valuable thing there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. How can, but I think this is also the case for in-person events versus having something on Zoom. I noticed before the pandemic started, I would go to one of my local universities. I would go to McGill's colloquia on Fridays, and then I would go have wine and cheese. And then the pandemic happened, and suddenly I could go to any university's colloquia because I could go to any of their Zoom rooms, and suddenly I went to 0 colloquia because I could do too much, and having it be physical constrained my choices. So having an event be physical and being like, this is the one time that Gretchen McCulloch is in Estonia, maybe she'll never come back. So, you have to come to this or else you'll never see her. Or, if you're doing the physical event for children, this is the one time you get to what? You can create that sort of scarcity with time and space as well. And this is also for if you make, a language museum or something like this, it's in a specific space, it's open at a specific amount of time, and that kind of scarcity can make people think, oh, well, I have to actually do that now, versus someday I'll do it, but it's too easy to do because I could do it at any time, and so I never get around to doing it. So that's a thought about scarcity. Let's go to the third kind of media. So the third kind of media is referred to as owned media. I didn't come up with these terms, they're used in publicity. These are information channels that you control directly. Can anybody think of some examples?
The university?
Yeah, so Instagram page of especially the department, because the university, if you want something posted there, you probably have to go talk to them and say, hey, can you post this? Whereas Tartu Ling, it's like, okay, well, you just talk to Kate and Kate decides to post it. It's pretty easy, yeah. What else?
Okay, YouTube channels, Twitter profile.
Right, so blog, YouTube channel, Twitter profile. If you set it up yourself, you decide what goes on there, but also people have to find you somehow. Podcast also, yes, that's true. Project website, yeah, your own website. Like Medal just decides what goes on Medal's website. Sometimes. What about non-internet forms?
Newsletters or magazines, like universities can have magazines as well, for example.
Right, so if you have a list of addresses, whether that's email addresses or physical addresses, you could send people things in the mail and say, hey, here's what we're up to. Like I get these little flyers from my alumni magazines every year that's like, here, we're doing this. And I'm like, cool, whatever. So yeah, sending people physical things in the mail.
And also like have your own like solo evening or like a stand-up evening, or you offer some kind of presentation or talk series.
Yeah, you could do talks, like a talk series or stand-up stuff. You could stand on a little box in the square and say, hey, anybody want to hear about linguistics?
That reminds that at least in Ivy League, it's popular, wine and science. So apparently, like, professors can go and have a nice evening and people just have wine in a bar or like in a fancy place, and then you just showcase your research or any kind of interesting topic.
You should absolutely do that in Tartu.
But that's not owned by us.
Yes.
It's somewhere where you have to pitch the topic so that a linguistic topic can be.
But we do have the reading talks that provide wine.
And great speakers.
So it's a combination of, like, this is why it's interesting to think about earned media versus owned media, because they can be very, very similar. As you just said, oh, we're going to give some talks. And is this going to be sort of a consortium where we're organizing it together with some other departments and we're going to have to pitch a speaker from linguistics versus a speaker from chemistry or a speaker from philosophy? Or is this going to be a linguist-specific thing where there might still be one person who's organizing the talks, and if you want to bring someone, you still have to pitch that one person, but you have a bit more control over whether you're doing it? Any more sort of physical types of posters? So one way of getting people's attention is you put a little sign by somewhere where maybe some people are going to walk by. So if you're having something like a yard sale, people have yard sales, or like you're selling some jam or something, and you're like, down here 5 kilometers, you could buy apples. Everyone wants apples this time of year, I hear. Over here, free apples. Please take all of my apples away. Stickers. I will give you money for apples. I will give you money to take my apples away. I like this sticker. It's a hand.
Yes, we can show you whose hand it is.
Also, you can have like physical objects that you give to people. So I have some of these Lingthusiasm stickers. Does anybody want a sticker? Yesterday the people who came to the talk got cards, but you guys get stickers because it's special for people who come to the workshop.
The diehards who were here in the afternoon.
Yeah, they didn't get it in the morning.
The consultation.
I'm sorry to the people on Zoom that I can't connect you with stickers over Wi-Fi, but unfortunately the technology is not very good for that.
Stickers Unbelievably popular.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're not that expensive to make. Like, especially if you get like a couple hundred at once. So this is a sticker. I'm gonna do a little demo. This is gonna be fun. Actually, why don't you take a sticker and then keep passing them around so I don't have to go between all these tables. I regret everything. So there's also two kinds of ways of doing stickers. These are Lingthusiasm stickers, which promote the podcast very directly. And if you don't like the podcast, they're kind of, oh, is there not enough? Here, there's more. Yeah. If you don't already have an affinity with the podcast, you might be less excited about them. Compared to my second set of stickers, which are Booba Kiki stickers. And so you can like these stickers without already liking the podcast because these refer to a broader meme in linguistics. And so there's this interesting tension when we're creating stickers. And I have two kinds of stickers for this reason, which is how much am I trying to do the sort of direct kind of self-promotional sticker, which is of more benefit to me, but it's also harder to convince someone else to take it and put it on stuff. Whereas if I do these stickers that are a little bit more cryptographic because they don't have the name of the podcast on it anywhere, they're the same color, subtle. You should take one of each once I get this one open. So yeah, once you're in a position where people are like, ideally, in some case, you have a combination of earned media and owned media so if I have a podcast and a book that I control directly for people to see, and then I'm doing other types of things in collaboration with people that are hopefully sending people to the stuff that I control directly, I'm solving this problem of how do people find me, but also of being able to communicate stuff in a format that I enjoy, as well as doing some stuff that caters more towards specific audiences. So it's not only one or the other, but thinking about like how many of your projects do you control the audience for? How many of the projects do you, do you have less control, but also potentially a larger reach because you're working with someone? And also that not all of these projects have to be one person. Like for me, this is my job and I do it all the time. And even then there are some things that I'm like, yeah, children, someone else can do children. Because I don't have, it's easier if you like work at a school or something to do that. But if people, but yeah, so that's, but also if you're doing a project with people, let's say you have a really fun evening planned or afternoon or booth somewhere, and people come and they do a really interesting activity. It's 5 minutes, it's an hour. Great, okay, they've learned something. What happens next at that point where they're leaving the room and they're thanking you and they're saying, that was really fun? Do you say, okay, bye, and you let them vanish again into the mists of the general public? Often we do this. Do you let them just sort of escape? Or do we say, hey, if we do another one of these, would you like to give us your email address and we'll tell you about it? Or, hey, if you now think linguistics is really cool, here's like 3 different ways that you could do more linguistics. There is a, blog you can follow that we have, but not only your own projects, right? Like there's this project that someone else is doing that you could go to next week because there's more talks and someone else is organizing them. Or there is like a podcast or a YouTube channel or these other types of places where you could continue doing that information, even especially when they're not by you. Because one of us can't make all of the Linguam projects for all of the people and reach every single part of the general public, but we can work together and showcase other people's projects as ways for people to keep engaging with linguistics, because ultimately linguistics is bigger than us. And you guys had this reaction when I pulled out the Booba Kiki stickers. We didn't make that study. This is something that linguists like because it's part of linguistics. We're promoting the people who made this study. But this is more popular because we're not promoting ourselves. So if you're continually engaging with people's attention, pointing them towards things that aren't just, okay, and we made this stuff and we're trying to keep you in this little ecosystem of we are all of linguistics to you, and more of, okay, we're trying to point you to, here are some other ways you can engage with linguistics, some of which we've done, but also some of which other people have done, and which we can sort of pass around and reciprocate, then this is ultimately good for the field as a whole.